Thank you all for coming. This is the League of Women Voters Women Speaker Series meeting, and I'm Lauren Benz, and I'm just opening the meeting. We don't have any announcements that I know of. If we do, we'll take those after the meeting. Christina, you're open for questions after? Okay, and I will turn it over to Kathy LaFortune, who will introduce our speaker.
It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce Christina Mangiapani. And if you want to remember how to say that, Manji means eat, Pani is bread, so Mangiapani, eat your bread. And it's a lunchtime meeting, so that's really appropriate. Christina has lived in Latah County for about 2 decades, a little over 2 decades, so very well established within the community, but I've only had the pleasure of knowing her for the last 3+ years, a little bit. We hired Christina at Latah County as a contract grant writer to kind of give it a try and see how it would work. And then I fought very, very hard to get her on as a full-time employee, which is a status, except for a brief period of time where she thought maybe the grass was greener. Then came back to Latah County and has been our grant writer ever since. When I was campaigning, those of you who have ever been on a campaign know the pleasures of door knocking. I was up in Viola, and I had an individual say, if we could just have broadband service out here, I wouldn't have to rent a place in town in Moscow to conduct my business, because I have a small farm. I'd like to be able to do everything from the site of the farm, but I have to go into town to conduct the business portion of my business. And I've never forgotten, I said I will promise to do everything I can on that realm while I'm in office. And of course I can't do that by myself, so in walks Christina and says, I think we can make this work. Christina has incredible connections within the community. She's really good at bringing people together, getting everybody on the same page, answering the same question over and over and over again, just to bring everybody's knowledge up to the same level. So whether you're really well versed in broadband infrastructure, or this is your first introduction to what broadband is, which is where Christina started, then I think you will learn something from her presentation. I also want to just toot her horn a little bit. This broadband coalition that she formed, we just received $15 million from the state of Idaho to begin to build out that open fiber structure in Latah County. 15 million. And when you consider the entire county's budget is about 28 million this year, that's a huge, huge amount of money that we're going to be able to use to build broadband infrastructure within Latah County and hopefully get affordable, high-speed internet to every resident in Latah County, with the exception of those who don't go out of county and go down to the San River and not do that. With no more further ado, Christina.
Thank you. Thanks, Kathy. And as you mentioned, I'm Christina, and I'm going to, despite being asked to speak today, I get a little anxious about public speaking, so I've written down my spiel, but I encourage you to ask questions or stop me as we go along. And I just want to thank you up front for stopping by to talk about broadband. This is a big deal in Latah County and across the nation right now. So today, I'm here to share some of the many insights community leaders, coalition members, and I have gathered over the past couple of years related to broadband. First, we'll talk about what it is and why we need it, and then how Latah County and the coalition of stakeholders are working together to build digital highways and bridge the digital divide. I happen to be kind of a language nerd, so you'll have to excuse the play on words or celebrate it if you're similarly nerdy. But either way, I do hope it'll become apparent why roads and bridges are really fitting when we talk about broadband. Not only for the figurative or metaphorical aspects, but also for the real correlation to transportation infrastructure. So let's get to it. And again, I'll say feel free to stop me as we move along if there's an opportunity to expand, discuss, ask questions. Oh, that's a little blurry, but that's okay. When we say broadband, we're essentially referring to anything that allows you to connect to an information or communication service. For simplicity's sake, the internet. To date, there are lots of ways to do this, including wireless options, like mobile or cellular service, radio waves or fixed wireless, and satellite. And there are wired options, like coaxial cable, copper digital subscriber lines, and fiber optic cables. Although it seems like there are a lot of options, the different types of broadband technologies are not all equal. Some are fast and can support a lot of data and info all at once with no problem, while others are slow and have limited bandwidth or capacity or reduced reliability when there's, for instance, inclement weather or lots of trees, which we happen to have in Latah County. So this is where yet more analogies can help. When we build roads, the type of road that's built is usually dependent on the frequency of traffic, load or weight that traffic is carrying, and how public the use of the road is. For major thoroughfare traffic, we use asphalt or concrete. For less traveled and less costly options, there's gravel. And for largely non-motorized transportation, there's dirt. Or another. Imagine a world where electricity wasn't considered a utility, and you have the option of choosing how to light your home. On one end of the spectrum, there's direct current. Another option, oil-based lanterns. And finally, wax candles. Luckily, we don't have to choose between these, right? So now this is how we've come to understand information and communication delivery services. Fiber is the longest lasting, has the highest capacity, and delivers the fastest service. It's what's called future-proof these days. Copper is still a direct wired connection, but doesn't have anywhere near the capacity or abilities to serve connections the way fiber does. And satellite and wireless options are the least reliable, but still great alternatives in a pinch or in certain circumstances where wires just aren't feasible, like in super remote areas. Yeah.
And what is fiber made of? What is that? Just plastic?
Glass.
Oh.
Fiberglass.
Mm-hmm. So now that we kind of have a baseline on what broadband is, how does it function in society? It's been long considered critical infrastructure. What does that mean? Critical infrastructure includes the vast network of highways, connecting bridges and tunnels, railways, utilities, and buildings necessary to maintain our daily lives, essentially. Transportation, commerce, clean water, and electricity all rely on critical infrastructure. These assets, systems, and networks are considered so vital to the U.S. that if they were incapacitated or destroyed, it would have a debilitating effect on homeland security, national economic security, national public health, public safety, or all of the above. Strengthening and maintaining this critical infrastructure is one of government's main jobs. So, broadband isn't necessarily new critical infrastructure, but I'm calling it new. While it's always been on the list, how important it has become is certainly new. One of the distinctive characteristics about this particular piece of critical infrastructure is how each and every one of the others depends on it today. And moving forward, will depend on it even more so into the future. Community and coalition members taught me that they need broadband for their water and wastewater systems, for their energy and power grids, for agriculture and food production, public health and safety, government services, cybersecurity, and many other things. So how did we get here? I just want to take a step back and do a little bit of background on how the broadband conversation has moved over the past few years. For many years prior to 2019, the state and the region were making slow but steady progress on broadband expansion. Ultimately, leadership recognized that progress wasn't being made as quickly as a new, more technology-based economy demanded. So Governor Little established a broadband task force that studied the broadband landscape throughout Idaho, identified and evaluated obstacles, and reported their recommendations for overcoming them. This was when the Federal Communications Commission still defined adequate broadband service as a minimum speed, which was 25 megabits per second download speed and 3 megabits per second upload speed. And most grant programs were geared toward private internet service providers. But then COVID-19 happened. And of course, it changed everything. All of this work became urgent, and the barriers associated with cost and slow or non-existent service had to be surmounted urgently, which meant they needed to start thinking differently about broadband. The ways that they started doing that were defining broadband as basic infrastructure, updating minimum standards to future-proof, quote-unquote, build-outs, which means fiber, and requiring community or government-led or partnered projects. So we see these moves in recent legislation, like the American Rescue Plan Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and virtually every single grant program or funding opportunity for broadband. The National Association of Counties, as well as the Idaho Broadband Task Force and Advisory Board, have recognized that broadband is essential infrastructure for our communities. And we now know, with new maps and data, that our communities are still very much unserved. If we take a look at some of the new broadband maps using data collected from households that use broadband, we get a much better idea of what's really going on in our communities in Latah County. This one's created by the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, and it displays key indicators of broadband needs, including different data sets that reveal where folks don't have quality internet access down to the census block. So as you can see, the northeastern part of Latah County shows that over 16% of households have no internet access, and those that do have speeds less than 10.3. In the central eastern part of the county, the picture is much the same. 19% of households with no access at all, and those with access have less than 10.3. Keep in mind that these areas were previously reported as served at 25.3 speeds. And now we have to make the leap to 5 to 10 times that. Even if you're not familiar with megabits or broadband speeds, you know that 100 or 1,000 is a lot more than 10 or 25, right? Let's see. And then finally, the southeastern tract, 20% with no access and less than 10.3 for those with service. Even more accurate maps are in the works at the federal, state, and local levels. But this newer broadband map shows us exactly what our community members have been telling us all along. We are underserved. And as a matter of fact, according to new broadband standards, we are now actually considered unserved, not underserved. I have no doubt that some of you here know this all too well, either from your own experience or knowing someone who can't get connected.
What changed the definition?
Essentially the need. After the pandemic, when parents were trying to work from home simultaneously and kids going to school and all of this, they realized they couldn't do it all on the connection that they had.
Under was not low enough, we needed.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And they raised the benchmark for what broadband is as well, so that changed it as well. A large part of the issue is how Latah County is situated. We're 98% rural by geography and 32% rural by population, which makes reaching the 12,500 residents who live outside the city of Moscow exceptionally difficult. If you break it down by location, which is what broadband maps prioritize, because they're talking about connections to locations, not connections to people, there are almost as many locations outside of Moscow city limits as there are inside. So roughly 7,200 locations in Moscow and 5,800 locations outside of Moscow throughout the county. Add on to that the fact that Moscow's on the westernmost edge of the county, close to the University of Idaho and WSU, Highway 95, and the major fiber corridor, whereas the rest of the county is 1,070 square miles of topographically diverse terrain with households, cities, and schools spread out all across it. What's more, to the north, east, and south of the county lines is largely unpopulated timbered acreage, which provides no alternate route for connection and essentially cuts off most of rural Latah County from broadband services and infrastructure.
Just a little note, when they were developing these maps, based on speed tests and everything, we kept coming up as this black hole as far as service in our region. And it's not just Latah County, it's a good chunk of region too. And part of that, and you didn't refer to it, but on the previous slide, if you look at the fiber network, which is that upper right, our fiber comes from the southern part of the state by going either through Washington, you know, and then over, or down through, isn't it down, all the way down through Utah, and then up and around through in order to get to us. And so when we applied for this broadband grant, and adjacent to it is another grant that will eventually build the infrastructure from New Meadows up the Highway 95 corridor to Moscow, which we will then have that direct connection to the southern part of the state, which will again help with redundancy, because you don't want to have just one line, because then if somebody goes out and digs and breaks it, then you're cut off. So we need that redundancy so that if something does get cut off, we can still go through Washington, or if Washington gets cut off, we can still go through Idaho.
Quick question. So the red lines we're seeing up there, those are the fiber lines, correct?
Those are, it's not exact, but those are some of the national fiber lines, yes.
And
Yeah.
Yes, national network.
And so you're saying that we need redundancy, that existing one is not adequate?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Like if, and if you think it's not that critical, think about your 911 telephone call. If you call from Beauville or from Orofino, and that line is cut, like 911 calls won't go through.
And we don't even have this coming into Latah County. So it's actually, like I say, it's a little off, but the one that comes in, you see what looks like Latah County? That line that comes into the south of it actually goes to Lewiston. And the one above it is way up in Coeur d'Alene. So there's just nothing right in the middle where we are. Okay, so we're unserved. What do we do about it? How do we pay for it? It was clear we needed a little help from our friends. We built a coalition so as many stakeholders as possible could be involved in charting a course forward. We focused on community anchor institutions, not only because they're pillars of their communities, but also because they're decision makers, asset owners, natural communicators, and likely for all those reasons, grant programs prioritized them. These community anchor institutions are also very conveniently major fiber connectors. The route to future-proofing the county with fiber infrastructure started to reveal itself when you map out these locations. And luckily, they all agreed to band together to play a vital role in the planning and building of the basic infrastructure that's necessary to connect all county residents. And so together, we embarked on this journey to collaborate, not only as connection points for infrastructure, but also as partners in leveraging funds and projects to apply for the different pots of money that are available for broadband. They pledged to participate, mainly in information sharing and gathering, to help build a plan, identify projects, and to whatever extent possible, help execute those projects. This is just a copy of the pledge. And I want to take a moment to recognize these individuals who have stayed the course and remained engaged over these many, many months of meetings and check-ins and conversations. These people are the reason this future-proof infrastructure will become a reality in Latah County. Some of these names have changed over the last 2 years, but the dedication from the organizations hasn't. We typically get about 70% regular participation, which really ain't too shabby for this big a group. As I'm sure most of you know, the effort over the last 2 years was only really possible because of the effort over the last 20 years. And the many community members and leaders who made huge strides in helping others understand the importance of broadband. So there's some kind of saying about standing on the shoulders of giants and things like that. And certainly this effort wouldn't have been possible without those people. So if you see a name on there you recognize, or you know of one of the many that's not listed, make sure to thank them for all the work they've done to get Latah County connected.
I noticed that you had South Latah Highway District, but not North.
Yes, we keep North Latah Highway District apprised of things that are going on, but they chose not to sign a pledge.
Oh, okay.
So they kind of get all of the same information, but for whatever reason they're
Because one has
Two-thirds, yes.
county.
Yes.
Okay.
I
Thank
do,
you.
I do visit their meetings though. Just a little extra work.
What was the pledge?
It was, basically, blah, 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 we think broadband's important. And assign a representative, to serve on the committee, participate in information sharing and gathering, and agree to leverage available funding to pursue future-proof broadband projects.
So a good example is probably 5 years ago when I first became a commissioner, it was like, well, this is an important priority. You know, this was even before COVID-19. And I was sitting on an economic development board because I just got assigned to it. And I was like, well, you know, I want to find out where the fiber is and where it's dark. In other words, it exists, but we can't access it because it belongs to to an ISP, to an internet service provider. And I want to know all the networks where, like, all the railway right-of-ways are and utility right-of-ways were. And I was like, can I get that information? And I just kind of got laughed at because it was like, well, that's proprietary information. We don't have to share that. And Christina, with this broadband coalition, was able to surmount that hurdle, get that proprietary information, and create a map, which is part of our plan. Because we do need to cooperate with all of those entities in order to get this done.
And how often do you meet?
In the first year, or first 6 months rather, we met every month to build common knowledge. And then since then, it's kind of been as needed. So each coalition member represents an institution that has a stake in building broadband in Latah County and for the communities they serve. We were all charged with making sure we're communicating with our leaders about what goes on in the coalition, especially when there are tasks that require collaboration, communication, and buy-in. For instance, if they were representing a city and they're already on city council, it probably wasn't super difficult to communicate with council, right? But if they're a resident representing a city, they may need to take extra effort to communicate with that council by updating them at council meetings or having regular conversations with the mayor. If they're representing a special district or other type of entity, they may be communicating with their board or other type of leadership team. But however it shook out, members act as a liaison between the coalition and their community in order to share and gather the information necessary to develop these projects. And so with that coalition established, we were ready to do the hard work of becoming grant ready. After all of that, we can start. We completed an asset report, as Kathy mentioned. We curated experts and presenters for the meetings, built common knowledge around broadband, built a website to engage and inform citizens, sent out press releases every time there was something major that happened, launched a speed test campaign, discussed different models and options for infrastructure, among other activities. All of this helped us put together a plan that was ready to be funded. And that plan is a multi-phased approach to comprehensively connect all of Latah County with future-proof fiber infrastructure. Phase 1, build digital highways where there are none. And that is essentially the red lines.
The red line.
Yes. Phase 2, connect those community anchor institutions we talked about with fiber. Those are your schools, your city halls, your community centers, your fire halls, etc. Phase 3, contract with engineers for detailed designs to be able to build fiber within cities. Phase 4, run fiber lines to our 8 public safety towers to ensure reliable, resilient, and redundant communication capacity for fire, ambulance, search and rescue, and other first responders, along with any other retail providers that also provide
Those are
service.
the white dots?
Yes.
Okay.
Not the white dot.
The yellow push pins with the blue lines.
Oh, there, okay.
The white dots are just highway numbers. so
Yeah. They're not easy to see.
Yeah. No. Okay, phase 5, build the fiber to the home in each city that was designed and engineered in phase 3. And voila, phase 6. Continue to connect every location in Latah County with the assets we built until everyone is served. We planned, and it's paying off finally. Granted, there is about $77 billion, yes with a B, billion dollars out there for broadband right now. But we, as Latah County and the coalition, have ready access to about $750 million through the state. So far, we applied for capital projects funds and were awarded $15 million.
Out of the 120.
Out of the 120, which we just learned last week. And we're preparing to apply for about the same amount through the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, or BEAD, which will open next year. So far, all of this broadband work has been related to infrastructure, but there's another piece to the puzzle. Remember roads and bridges. Half is building digital highways and driveways, and the other half is building bridges across what has been dubbed the digital divide. Yes, there's more. Making sure community members are comfortable using the infrastructure once it's available is crucial to fully participating in this increasingly digital economy and society of ours. So we've been lucky enough to be able to partner with the University of Idaho Extension's Digital Economy program, as well as Idaho Commission for Libraries, to create a digital access or digital inclusion plan. I've stolen a few slides from a recent coalition meeting presentation that they gave. So among so many other things to thank them for, I thank Amber and Kylie for making this a little bit easier on me. This is the people infrastructure part. What barriers exist to adopting new technologies, and what programs and resources can we implement to eliminate those barriers? How can we help community members connect to digital tools, opportunities, and resources? And we've got Kylie to help us. The UI Digital Economy Program is placing AmeriCorps members across the state to meet community members where they live. And ours is Kylie Holbeck, who is thankfully here today to answer any questions about this effort. She's a local resident and a Vandal who will be serving Latah County as a digital literacy coordinator, working to improve digital access and opportunity, beginning with outreach and listening sessions, and culminating, hopefully, in yet another plan, a digital access plan for Latah County. We hope this planning will again set us up to compete for funding in order to implement projects, programs, and develop other resources that will bridge the digital divide. This funding is administered through the Idaho Commission for Libraries through the Digital Equity Act. Kylie's connecting participants to put a plan together, so if you're interested, connect with her today or sign up on our website, which you can access by searching Latah County Broadband Coalition or jotting down the link that's at the end of the presentation. We also hope she'll be able to help spread the word about the Affordable Connectivity Program, since we already know that affordability is one of the major barriers to getting folks connected. The Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP, offers a $30 discount to eligible households on their internet service. As you can see, quite a few households in Latah County are eligible, but not too many are enrolled. You can also find information about this program on our website or spread the word yourself by using these handy-dandy outreach tools available through the Federal Communications Commission. You can post on social media if you have that, or tell a friend, or I don't know, post a poster somewhere. And let's see, with that, I'm gonna stop talking, open it up for questions, discussion, and invite and introduce Kylie Holbeck, who's sitting here, in case there are questions related to her work as well.
So are you going to be digging trenches? How are you going to get this fiber going?
I've been working. Well, obviously we'll need to procure for construction contractors and we're prioritizing local labor, local workforce, so that those dollars can help build our local economy.
Point of information, can you back up about 2 slides where you showed all the communities?
Mm-hmm.
There. That's incredible.
You might be able to
Information, yeah.
Well, and especially I feel like the 4,400, because what did I say earlier? There's about 40 or 52 200 locations in Moscow. So that's the majority of locations in Moscow that are low income and eligible for the Affordable Connectivity
Yeah, but
Program.
it's what's interesting is to realize how many eligible households there are
Mhm.
in Genesee, I mean, in any place
Yep.
out in the community, and when you add those all up, the number of households that are eligible, and then the number that have enrolled,
Mhm.
is just, I mean, it's like over 5,000 next to 600. Yeah.
We need to put that in the paper
We-
with an explanation so that people will say, oh, I didn't know I could do this, I should do it.
We should do another, we did a press release when the program first opened, but that was, I want to say, like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
One of the things too to remember is not everybody is able to connect to the internet.
Yes.
So if they don't have a connection, they're obviously not able to use the resource. So that's
But they can
chicken
use
and
their
egg.
local library in order to do that, and that might be a really good place to, people that don't have internet connections at home will almost everybody has one of these now. So they have at least cellular connectivity. A lot of them are connected to social media, a good place to put it on. The other place would be people that don't have a computer at home will sometimes go to the library and use those stations. So this should be up on the wall in every library kiosk.
And I know Chris has got that covered. Chris
I figured
Sobel.
she'd
Yeah.
This is really a suggestion, because certainly I like to think I keep up with stuff,
Mhm.
and this is so much new information, but there are so many entities ranging from the university to the Chamber of Commerce to service clubs or whatever that have like a weekly or monthly newsletter,
Mhm.
the Historical Society, and to do press releases, examples, and say, the did you know
Mhm.
sort of thing, and like pick Viola,
Mhm.
whatever. And because Moscow, we can like it or lump it, but we're the lump in Latah County. Well, and you look at those people, and I mean, they work in Moscow at the bank, or at the university, or at the hospital. They may live in Viola or Juliet
Yeah.
or wherever, but they're connected to Moscow. But to just find some additional ways to get the information out, and find ways that they do use. I mean, do they get a daily newspaper? Are they a member of the Chamber of Commerce, whatever? And certainly the Chamber of Commerce, because most of the members are businesses, if this came up to them,
Included as a flyer in their cell phone bill.
yeah, they could pass it on to their employees, that did you know that if you live in Potlatch, you're still eligible. I
Well,
mean,
depends on income and other things too. It's not, like, I'm not eligible.
That's because you work for the county.
One of the things that we did talk about, but we haven't been able to deploy yet was, I mean, the county communicates with every location. We do tax assessments, we do all these things. So that'd be a direct, put a little note. I don't know if it would be nice in your tax assessment notice, but at least it would be there.
That's coming out in the end of November.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose to get a better sense physically what this entails. Is it like telephone wires that
Yes,
can go
yes,
underground or above ground?
Yes.
So-
All of the above.
And connecting those few lines that we have in the
Mm-hmm. So our cost estimates for our projects were based on 50% buried and 50% aerial, which would be telephone poles, with buried being 80% trenching and 20% boring. One of the things that grant programs and the legislation want people to consider are climate considerations. So especially in a rural county, we have wildfires, we have, all kinds of things. This infrastructure is meant to last 30, 50 plus years. So we want more buried infrastructure. We're working with Avista even, because I know they want to bury some lines, even though it's cost prohibitively expensive. But the goal is to bury stuff, not necessarily to hang it, but it's a lot cheaper to hang it.
Yeah, I'll just keeping the analogy in mind. Sometimes they do close mawn-jee-uh-pawnee.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I can't keep track of who's raised their hand first, so.
Do you want me to play him?
Sure, yeah.
So I have a couple of related questions. So who's going to own this infrastructure? And for the clients that access it, what are they going to be charged? And then how much do you anticipate this whole project is going to cost?
Yes, great, okay. Number one, who's going to own it? Latah County has agreed to own in name only, not operate, not manage. We have expert partners for that. One of those partners is Petrichor Broadband and follows the...
Is who?
Petrichor Broadband. I guess the name is something about the smell after rain in the Northwest or something like that. Yeah. And the Port of Lewiston, which built dark fiber network. So what we're doing, we're trying to separate the infrastructure from the service. So the same as we build roads and don't control whether UPS or a logging company or some other service or postal service or resident drives on it, same for the fiber. What will they be charged? That'll be dependent on, the idea behind having publicly owned infrastructure is that it lowers the capital expenditures for the internet service providers. So if I'm an internet service provider and I'm a business owner and I have to put up $1 million to build a fiber line from here to here, you better believe that the people that are getting service here are paying me back for that $1 million. What this is supposed to do is eliminate that so that internet service providers can make service more affordable for residents. What exactly that's going to look like, we don't know for sure yet. But kind of the talk around having a median $70 with an affordability option of $30 that for eligible households that are covered by ACP would make it free. That's kind of where we're at with that. And then remind me of the third. I lost my track. How much is the whole thing going to cost? Yes. Oh, I wish I had that on there. It's on our website, but the entire thing with all of the assets and match and everything that we're leveraging for the project is about $41 million, and we're asking for grant funding in the amount of about $30 million. And we have 15 already.
I'm going to go ahead and
Yes.
you and then you. Sorry.
Okay, my question is, how much is already in place? What percentage of your plan is already, because obviously there's people enrolled, things are happening, so what's in place? And explain more the roads and bridges part. Are we talking actual roads and bridges? So the whole budget covers both fiber and roads and bridges?
Well, we're kind of likening. Let me go try to find its way out here. Likening the infrastructure piece to building roads and bridges. So one of the reasons why we have to be in conversation with Idaho Transportation Department, our North and South Lake Tahoe Highway districts, our utility owners, our city, yes, rights of way. So, I mean, literally, infrastructure will be in or under roads, but we're also building roads to internet access, if you will, so that somebody in Beauville can apply for a job online, and you know, that connection is going to ping hopefully somewhere in Idaho and not all the way to Utah. And then what percentage of it is done? Well, I will say that's a really good question. I don't have an answer for you. I would say that the monumental effort that we've had over the last 2 years, I wish I could say that meant we were like 80% done, but it means that we're like 5 or 10% done. Because all of the money has to come in, and then all of the, I mean, this is going to be like 5 to 7 years from now, you know, making sure all of this gets done. That said, some of our local partners where we've been in conversation with. So I said the red is where we need to build. One of the great things is that the red between Moscow all the way to Beauville is kind of purple, because First Step Internet won an E-rate contract, which is for schools and libraries to build fiber to the White Pine Joint School District in Deary and Beauville.
Explain.
So there's all, remember that $77 billion number I had on there? There's all kinds of funding pots that come down for broadband. E-rate is a program through an organization that funds schools and libraries, basically, internet service and access, and devices and things like that. And they bid on a project to
A different grant.
different grants.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Thanks.
But that doesn't finish my question. My final question was, folks like us, I mean, we pay Spectrum every month and we have good broadband service. So the service you're talking about is on top of the existing service for those of us in town who are lucky enough to already have it.
Well, in the city of Moscow, none of this is really going to be applicable. It's all for the locations outside the city of Moscow.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to give you a really good example, and then I'll call on you. But a really good example is I work in healthcare. That's my other job. I'm a physical therapist with the early intervention program. And when COVID-19 hit, they shut us down. No more going into the home. You're providing all of your services via a program called WebEx. So contact the family, give them a link to the meeting. That's how we met with families. I could provide really good service. It was hard to be a physical therapist online, but I could provide that service to any family that lived within the city limits of Moscow.
Yeah.
If I got a referral on a family that lived in Helmer, I couldn't connect. We could not connect via that. We were lucky if we could connect via phone call, let alone having a video conference where we could have a back and forth type of conversation. And that only worked even in Moscow. If I was within Moscow, at the time I was living out in Viola, I could not conduct those meetings online.
So
So
people in Moscow.
2 people in Moscow because of my internet connection out there. Now it's your turn.
Okay, so we have internet, we're rural, north of town. So how is this gonna work? Is our internet provider gonna say, now you have the possibility of faster service, and we're gonna charge, if you want that, we're gonna charge you X amount more, or is this gonna be automatic?
It will all go through an internet service provider. So it depends on what your service already is. Do you have a wired connection?
No, it's Starlink. It doesn't apply.
Oh yeah, so
It doesn't
We
even
would
apply.
just drop Starlink and use the fiber.
I see.
pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
And then you would choose from the suite of local providers that are able to provide service on that fiber line.
Okay, so you would have to install a fiber line,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't there yet.
Right.
But they don't have to build 30 miles of fiber line. They only have to build like the last 2 or whatever it is to get to your house. So then, because we have internet service providers that just say, we're not going to provide service to this group of 10 households out here in between Genesee and Julietta because it's not worth it. You know, by the time we build it just to the base, and then even if we have a fixed wireless or whatever to serve this community or fiber to the home, we can afford that last little bit. And, because they can't say, well, yeah, we can build fiber to your home, but it's going to cost you $500 a month.
Yeah, nobody's gonna do that.
Nobody's going to buy it. Okay, go ahead, Kathy.
Karen?
Sorry.
I'm wondering from that slide you showed with the people from all the different towns, and who are those people in that town? Is that?
Oh,
Yes.
the list. Oh,
So let me
yeah.
show
So
you
your
the-
farmer in Viola is going to be in the same state as I will be out on Linville Road with nothing?
Yes.
So here, and this is going to be really hard to see, but here are some of the breakdowns. Where we have separated from all of the within city limits to unincorporated areas that are outside city limits, different community centers, what the population is, what the locations are, and how much it would cost to connect all of those individual locations with a direct fiber connection. Here's a better example of like Bobo. There's 153 locations. So within city limits, building fiber to each and every home is going to cost a little bit over $500,000. And that doesn't include, the whatever it would have cost, $8 million to build the line from Moscow all the way to Bobo. If that makes sense. Does that kind of answer the question?
No.
Okay.
Your red line goes from like Moscow up to Beauville or wherever.
Uh-huh.
So everybody 5 miles from that line is still in the same spot that we are now.
Oh, no. So, sorry about that. So the fiber that we're connecting to the towers, the tower locations that I mentioned. Yeah, they're there. In addition to those being, sorry, it's really blurry. In addition to those being for public safety communications, it's also for enhanced fixed wireless. So if you have a connection, or you're able to get a connection that's like 10.3 with the fiber backhaul, they call it, to the tower, you'll be able to get upwards of 100 by 100. Until eventually the goal is to get direct fiber lines. But it's just so cost prohibitive. In here, we estimated that to connect every single location in Latah County with a direct fiber connection would cost over $380 million. Nobody's gonna give us that money. And nobody's gonna wanna pay for that as a taxpayer. But this hybrid approach, where we can say, there's 130 people that live really close to each other. We can do this for less money, and then we can get these lines out to towers that can, you don't get direct fiber, but you get a much better service. That's only about 36 million. So very big difference.
So I use this description because I'm like a digital immigrant, and I don't grasp this very well. But building that line from like Boise through to Lewiston, Moscow, that area, that's like the backbone of fiber. What we're creating here are the ribs, okay? You know, the basic.
Yeah, I understand.
And then from those ribs, it's much less distance, you know, for all the little capillaries and stuff that have to go to the house. Internet service providers can't afford to build that last mile, whether it's fixed wireless, fiber to the home, any of those kinds of things, that at a high-speed level, unless they already have the backbone and the ribs in place. Then they can make those short connections, and they can then compete with each other. Mm-hmm. And you know, so First Step might be competing with Spectrum, might be competing with, I can't remember all the words we have.
Inland, Airbridge.
Yeah, all of those different companies. That's what creates a lower price for you, the consumer, is you've got 5 different internet service providers saying, ooh, I can do that. Now that's affordable.
The other thing to keep in mind too is that this doesn't include all of the existing access points that some of the providers have now. What they're going to be able to do when they have a fiber backhaul to a major tower that can see a lot of the county is do what they call point to multi-point. So instead of, if there's a tower here now and there's no wires around it, they're jumping from maybe 7, 8 towers in another part of the state to get their spectrum to that tower to be able to serve within 3 miles or whatever. That significantly degrades the bandwidth and the speed and all that. But if you have a wire, a glass wire, it's running, it's a completely different situation. And I'm not a tech person, but that's about as much as I know.
I think the other point is you listed the different school districts. And one of the big problems, again, we had in COVID was the kids who couldn't do their homework because they weren't connected. And what the impact was on reading levels, on grade access, all that teacher, student stuff.
Sitting home with a Chromebook that can't hook up to anything.
And one of the things that I think this could do is, of course, greatly facilitate leveling the playing field for the kids who lived in town and had access to kids who lived out on the ranch or the farm and did not have access. And that alone would be a great
It's
plus.
not just at the grade level, I mean, at the university level.
Yeah.
You know, I'm interested in, I don't want to get too political though, but in the acquisition of the University of Phoenix. I taught online. I believe in the democratization of the university and of education in general. I mean, there are people in Washington where I taught who are just in the middle of nowhere and they just do not have opportunities. They really have the skills, they just need more of that. Can you speak to a little bit of that? I mean, there are a lot of opportunities here for increasing opportunities for higher ed
Absolutely. I want to bring up some of these quotes from our application. So Dan Smith, who's a coalition member and IT director for Kendrick Joint School District, in one of his stories that was in the Daily News, says we can give students all the devices in the world, but if they can't connect it to broadband internet, it's a useless tool.
Sending a kid home with a Chromebook.
Yeah. Another one from Dan Ewert at the University of Idaho, who's the Vice President for Information Technology and Chief Information Officer. Our students, faculty, and staff live all throughout Latah County. Broadband is a recruitment tool, a retention tool, a driver in economic development, and a critical component in improving life in our county. Education and research are no longer place-based activities. We use all of Latah County for our homes, our classrooms, our laboratories. To be competitive in drawing the best and the brightest to our county and to support growth and change in the future, we need fast, robust, redundant, and scalable broadband. I don't know if that hits it exactly.
Yeah.
Does the state government get involved in this at all?
So the funding that we're applying for, the state is essentially the lead entity on deploying all of this broadband money. So they're working with the National Telecommunications and Information Administration to put together the $583 million BEAD program that we're going to be applying for next year. And that has started. I mean, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act passed like 2 or 3 years ago. So we've kind of been working on this since then. But so yes, I mean, they're responsible for putting together a statewide asset map for coordinating with local communities to get a plan put together and deploying the funding.
So this is essentially federal money that's come through during the Biden administration.
Yes.
Is there any chance that our state legislature would prevent some of this money from being used?
I'm going to be really careful here.
Just asking.
We saw a little of this in the beginning. The legislature refused to appropriate the American Rescue Plan Act funding for this purpose, and then eventually did into the commerce budget. And now we're not seeing as much in the appropriations through joint finance, but we are seeing a reluctance to hire the necessary staff needed to be able to manage these programs. So this is all coming through the Idaho Department of Commerce. That department typically manages about $30 million in grant funding per year. They now have $750 million for broadband, which they didn't even have an office for before. So you would think that would require quite a bit of staff.
Yeah. At least one.
So to follow up on something you said, with fiber connections going to the tower locations in the county, I know the state has microwave towers on east or west, I forget which of the twins. So is that going to now substitute for the state's microwave public safety?
It probably won't
system?
substitute. What it will be is a redundancy. The fiber is going to be way more reliable, but if they have a microwave spectrum, connection, that'll probably be backup. The other thing about connecting fiber to these towers is it doesn't just benefit Latah County, it benefits everyone outside of Latah County that's able to connect to those as well. So,
Reach in.
yes.
Yeah. Two-way street.
Do you want to talk a little bit, Christina, about, there was one line item, I think, in one of your slides about cooperation with counties outside of Latah County in a separate. Can you just speak to that a little bit?
Sure.
Would you repeat your question?
Sorry, I'm pretty soft.
She wanted to know about one of the things we wrote in our proposal and what we've been working towards for the last couple years is making sure that we are communicating and coordinating with our neighboring counties, because roads, just like roads, fiber infrastructure goes across jurisdictions. So we have a memorandum of understanding with Latah County to our north, and we work on projects together. Shoshone, we don't have as much access to them, but they're doing a really good job, and so we're just trying to support them as much as we can. And then we're in our 5-county region, Clearwater Economic Development Association's region of Latah, Lewis, Idaho, Nez Perce.
Clearwater.
Thank you, Clearwater County. I always miss one, but it's different every time. And we've been working really closely with Clearwater Economic Development Association, as well as the Digital Interoperability Governance Board for District 2, which has been working on the public safety aspect of this for, 10 years? So they also submitted an application for a middle mile route from Grangeville to Orofino,
Yeah.
and won a little over $11 million
I
for that.
understand they got awarded that.
Yes,
They did,
Oh,
yeah.
that was in the paper.
Mhm.
And they're going through Lewis County.
Yes.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Part of that backbone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.